The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the usual mixture of languages, translation matrices working overtime to convert thousands of different species communications into something resembling order. Ambassador Zeth Ka of the hegemony straightened his crystalline carapace as he reviewed the day's agenda, his multifaceted eyes scanning through reports that had been flooding in for months. First contact with a new species was always significant, but this one felt different. The beings called themselves humans and hailed from a small blue world in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy. What made them interesting wasn't their technology, which was primitive by galactic standards, but rather the curious warnings that had surfaced from the archaeological division. Dr. Miran Solis, the Council's chief xenoarchaeologist, had made a disturbing discovery while excavating ruins on Korath Prime. Deep in the ancient predecessor sites, she'd found references to something called Terra and its inhabitants. The translations were fragmentary and often contradictory, but the tone was unmistakably cautionary. The young species spreads like wildfire across the void. One inscription read, "Their hunger for knowledge exceeds their wisdom. When they emerge, the galaxy will never be the same." Another fragment was even more ominous. "We tried to guide them, but they cannot be contained. They see suffering and charge toward it. They see impossible odds and call them interesting. Warn the future when the children of the third rock reach for the stars. Either embrace them completely or stay far away. There is no middle ground with humans." Zeth Ka had initially dismissed these warnings as the usual paranoid ramblings found in ancient ruins. Every extinct civilization seemed to think the next species to evolve would somehow be special or dangerous. But then the long-range scouts had made contact, and the reports were puzzling. The humans had greeted the Galactic Council's diplomatic vessel with something called jazz music and an offering of what they termed coffee. Their representative, a middle-aged female named Dr. Elena Martinez, had been unfailingly polite, curious about everything, and seemingly impressed by the galactic community's technological achievements. "We're honored to meet you," she had said through the translation matrix, her dark eyes bright with enthusiasm. "We've wondered if we were alone in the universe for so long. This is the greatest day in human history." She'd presented gifts, recordings of their music, samples of their art, mathematical proofs showing their understanding of physics, and detailed biological scans of their species. Everything had been offered freely, with no apparent attempt to hide anything or gain advantage. The scientific data was fascinating in its mediocrity. Humans were carbon-based bipeds with unremarkable lifespans, moderate intelligence, and primitive spaceflight capability. They had only recently achieved sustainable fusion power and were still confined to their single-star system. By galactic standards, they were barely past the Stone Age. Yet something about them nagged at Zeth Ka's consciousness. Dr. Martinez had asked unusual questions during the preliminary meetings, not about technology or trade, as most species did, but about suffering. "How do you handle natural disasters?" she had inquired. "What happens when species go to war? Are there still places in the galaxy where people go hungry or lack medical care?" When informed that yes, the galaxy still struggled with these issues despite advanced technology, her response had been unexpected. "Then there's work to do," she had said simply. The preliminary cultural exchange had lasted 3 standard weeks. Dr. Martinez had toured various council worlds, always asking questions, always observing. She'd shown particular interest in the refugee camps on Solitude Station, where survivors of the recent Kythera system collapse were being housed. The Kythera situation was an ongoing embarrassment for the council. Solar instability had made 5 worlds uninhabitable, displacing nearly 40 million beings. Despite the council's best efforts, resources were stretched thin. The temporary camps had become permanent settlements, overcrowded and undersupplied. Dr. Martinez had spent 2 full days walking through the camps, talking to refugees through portable translation units. She'd asked detailed questions about everything: supply logistics, medical care, educational systems for displaced children, psychological support networks. "This is unacceptable," she had finally told the camp administrators, her tone calm but firm. "These are people, not problems to be managed. They deserve better." The administrators had politely explained the resource limitations, the complex interstellar politics, the competing priorities. Dr. Martinez had listened carefully, taking notes on a primitive electronic device. "I understand," she had said. "May I make some suggestions?" What followed was a detailed proposal that reorganized the entire camp structure. She identified 17 separate inefficiencies in the supply chain, proposed a peer-to-peer education system that utilized the refugees' own expertise, and outlined a psychological support network based on something called community healing circles. The most remarkable part wasn't the suggestions themselves, though they were ingenious in their simplicity, but how quickly she had developed them. Dr. Martinez had synthesized complex logistical, cultural, and psychological data across multiple species in just 2 days. With no apparent computational assistance. "How did you formulate these recommendations so rapidly?" Administrator Vexnil had asked. "My species is good at solving problems," Dr. Martinez had replied with a slight smile. "Especially when people are suffering. See, and it is all. See, 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 see." When pressed for details about her background, she'd revealed that she was actually a xenobiologist by training, not a logistics specialist or social engineer. The refugee camp optimization had been, in her words, just common sense. The incident had been reported to the council, but filed under interesting cultural notes, rather than anything requiring action. After all, what threat could a species pose when their representative spent her time trying to help refugees? Now, 3 months later, as Zethka prepared for the formal first contact ceremony, those ancient warnings seemed increasingly relevant. Not because the humans had shown any aggression, quite the opposite, but there was something unsettling about their casual competence, their reflexive drive to solve problems that others had accepted as unsolvable. The formal ceremony was scheduled to take place aboard the Council flagship Harmony Eternal, a massive vessel that served as both diplomatic center and demonstration of galactic technological prowess. Representatives from 47 major species would attend, along with observers from hundreds of minor civilizations. Dr. Martinez arrived early, accompanied by a small delegation from Earth. She wore simple dark clothing that contrasted sharply with the elaborate robes and environmental suits of other attendees. Her companions included a military officer who introduced himself as Colonel James Chen, a scientist called Dr. Amara Okafor, and someone with the unusual title of Systems Integration Specialist, named Marcus Webb. What struck Zethka immediately was how they moved through the ship. Most first-time visitors to Harmony Eternal were overwhelmed by its scale and complexity. The vessel was 30 kilometers long, housed artificial ecosystems for dozens of different atmospheric requirements, and incorporated technology from across the galaxy. The humans certainly seemed impressed, but their reaction was different from what Zethka expected. Instead of wide-eyed wonder, they displayed what could only be described as professional appreciation, elegant solution to the multi-species environmental problem. "Dr. Okafor observed, examining the atmospheric processing systems. "The integration between biological and mechanical life support is remarkable." Colonel Chen was studying the ship's defensive systems with the eye of someone who understood military engineering. "Distributed point defense grid with overlapping fields of fire," he murmured to his companions. "Redundant power systems. Whoever designed this understood warfare." But it was Marcus Webb who made Zethka truly uncomfortable. The human with the puzzling job title was examining everything with an intensity that seemed almost predatory. Not malicious, exactly, but like someone cataloging information for future use. "Dr. Martinez." Zethka approached the human leader as they toured the ship's central command center. "Your companions seem quite observant." "Humans are curious by nature," she replied with that same slight smile. "We like to understand how things work. It helps us figure out how to make them work better." "Make them work better? Everything can be improved, Doctor," Martinez said simply. "That's one of the first things human children learn. Just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean it's the best way." The formal ceremony proceeded smoothly. Species after species welcomed humanity to the galactic community, offering trade partnerships and cultural exchanges. The humans listened politely, asked thoughtful questions, and expressed gratitude for the warm reception. During the feast that followed, Zeth-Ka found himself seated near the human delegation. He noticed that while Dr. Martinez engaged in the expected diplomatic conversations, her companions were having more interesting discussions. Dr. Okafor was deep in conversation with the Nexari Trade Federation's chief economist, discussing something called post-scarcity distribution models. Colonel Chen was somehow talking military strategy with the warrior poet Kathara, despite their species having no previous contact. Marcus Webb was sketching diagrams on a paper notepad primitive but unmonitored while explaining something to a group of fascinated engineering specialists. Your colleagues adapt quickly, Zeth-Ka observed to Dr. Martinez. Humans are social creatures, she explained. We're good at finding common ground, even with people very different from ourselves. It's a survival trait. Survival trait? Our species evolved on a world with multiple intelligent subspecies, Dr. Martinez said. Early human history was marked by constant contact between groups with different languages, customs, and ways of thinking. We learned to communicate and cooperate across differences, or we died. Zeth-Ka processed this information. Most species evolved in relative isolation before developing spaceflight. The idea of multiple intelligent variants sharing a single world was unusual, and explained some of humanity's apparent adaptability. Dr. Martinez, he said carefully, our archaeological division has discovered some ancient warnings about humanity. References in predecessor ruins that suggest your species might be challenging for the galactic community. Her response surprised him. Instead of offense or curiosity, she looked genuinely concerned. What kind of warnings? She asked. Zeth-Ka shared the relevant translations, watching her reaction carefully. Dr. Martinez listened without interruption, her expression growing thoughtful. The predecessors knew about humanity? She asked when he finished. Apparently, though the references are fragmentary. Ambassador Zeth-Ka, Dr. Martinez said slowly. May I ask you something in confidence? Of course. How satisfied is the Galactic Council with the current state of things? The question caught him off guard. I'm not sure I understand. The refugee situation. The resource distribution problems. The fact that with all this incredible technology, people still suffer needlessly. Are you satisfied with accepting these things as inevitable? Zeth-Ka felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. These are complex issues with no simple solutions. Are they? Dr. Martinez asked. Or are they complex issues that haven't had the right approach applied to them yet? Before Zeth-Ka could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed the command center in red as officers rushed to their stations. What's happening? Dr. Martinez asked, immediately alert. Distress signal from the outer rim, came the reply from the ship's captain. The Epsilon Eridani colony. They're reporting massive system failures and requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Epsilon Eridani was a human colony, Zeth-Ka realized. One of only 3 settlements humanity had established beyond their home system. And by far, their largest off-world population center. Dr. Martinez was already moving toward the communications station. Captain, request permission to coordinate directly with the colony. We know their systems better than anyone. Dr. Martinez, the captain replied diplomatically. We appreciate the offer, but the Council has established protocols for emergency response. Our disaster relief specialists are already coordinating the evacuation. How long will that take? The captain consulted his displays. Approximately 48 standard hours to deploy sufficient vessels for full evacuation. Dr. Martinez turned to her companions. Something passed between them, not words, but understanding. Colonel Chen was already activating his communicator. Dr. Okafor was pulling up data files on her portable device. Marcus Webb was studying the ship's sensor displays with intense focus. Ambassador, Dr. Martinez said to Zeth-Ka, I need to make a request that might seem unusual. What kind of request? Permission for humanity to handle this ourselves. The command center fell silent. Even the emergency alarms seemed quieter. Dr. Martinez, the captain said carefully, your species lacks the resources for a large-scale evacuation. Epsilon Eridani has over 2 million inhabitants. You have perhaps a dozen spacecraft capable of interstellar transport. We have more than that now, Colonel Chen said quietly, closing his communicator. Admiral Harrison confirms Terra fleet is en route. 18 ships, including 3 conversion carriers. Conversion carriers? Zethka asked. Cargo vessels retrofitted for emergency personnel transport, Dr. Martinez explained. We started building them after first contact. Just in case. Just in case of what? Just in case someone needed help. Marcus Webb looked up from the sensor station. Colony reports catastrophic failure in primary life support systems. Backup systems failing progressively. At current rate of degradation, full atmospheric system collapse in 36 hours. The numbers were stark. The Galactic Council's response fleet was well equipped and professionally run. But they needed 48 hours. The humans claimed they could be there faster, but with what appeared to be inferior technology. Dr. Martinez, the captain said, while we appreciate your species' desire to help your own people, this situation requires coordination with established protocols. We cannot authorize. Afar, clause. Captain, Dr. Martinez interrupted gently. I'm not asking for authorization. I'm informing you that humanity will handle this situation. We're asking for your support, not your permission. The words were spoken calmly, even politely. But something in Dr. Martinez's tone made everyone in the command center understand that this was not a request up for debate. Colonel Chen was receiving continuous updates on his communicator. Terra fleet achieves insertion in 18 hours. Emergency protocols are active. What does that mean? Zethka asked. Dr. Martinez looked at him with those dark, serious eyes. It means every human ship, station, and facility in this sector of the galaxy is now operating under emergency conditions. It means we're about to show you why the predecessors felt the need to leave warnings. She paused, then added quietly, it means you're about to learn what humans do when our people are in danger. The next 18 hours transformed Zethka's understanding of humanity in ways he never could have anticipated. It started with the ships. When Colonel Chen had mentioned Terra fleet, Zethka had imagined the handful of primitive vessels that humanity's scouting reports suggested they possessed. What emerged from hyperspace around Epsilon Eridani was something entirely different. Captain, the sensor operator reported, his voice strained with disbelief. I'm reading 43 distinct human vessels, classifications unknown. Several appear to be significantly larger than our intelligence suggested possible. On the main display, the human fleet materialized like something from a fever dream. The ships were angular, functional, and clearly built for utility rather than aesthetics, but their size was impossible to ignore. The largest vessel was easily 8 kilometers long, its hull configuration suggesting it had been hastily converted from some kind of industrial platform. How did they build ships that large without our detecting them? Zethka asked Dr. Martinez, who was monitoring communications from the human fleet through a portable device. We didn't build them, she replied absently, coordinating with her people. We converted them. Converted them from what? Asteroid mining platforms, deep space manufacturing stations, research facilities. Anything with a hull that could hold atmosphere and people. She looked up at him with that unnerving human smile. Humans are very good at repurposing things. The efficiency of the human operation was unlike anything the Galactic Council had seen. Within 3 hours of arrival, they had established a complete evacuation infrastructure around Epsilon Eridani. Smaller vessels swarmed around the failing colony, while the larger ships positioned themselves in precise formations that seemed to serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Marcus Webb had somehow gained access to the Council ship's sensor array and was providing real-time analysis. They're not just evacuating people, he explained to an increasingly fascinated audience of galactic observers. Look at the pattern. The display showed the human ships working in perfect coordination. Personnel transports moved in continuous streams between the colony and the larger vessels. But other ships were engaged in different activities. Some were harvesting materials from the planet's failing infrastructure. Others were deploying what appeared to be temporary atmospheric processors. They're saving the colony infrastructure while evacuating the population. Dr. Okafor observed, studying the data. Everything that can be moved is being moved. Everything that can't be moved is being replaced with temporary systems to preserve it. That's not how evacuations work, the council captain said slowly. Standard protocol is to prioritize personnel extraction. Material concerns are secondary. Standard protocol assumes the disaster is temporary, Colonel Chen replied, accepting a report from one of his aides. Humans plan for permanent solutions. The real revelation came when the evacuation numbers started coming in. The Galactic Council's disaster relief specialists had calculated that removing 2 million people from a failing colony world would require careful prioritization. Essential personnel first, then vulnerable populations, then general civilian evacuation based on available transport capacity. The humans were evacuating everyone simultaneously. How are they managing the logistics? Zethka asked Dr. Martinez, who was coordinating what appeared to be dozens of different operations through her simple handheld device. Community self-organization, she replied. We're not managing it centrally. We're providing transportation and coordination tools, then letting people organize themselves. On the displays, the evacuation looked chaotic to galactic eyes, but the numbers were undeniable. Human ships were loading and launching in continuous cycles, each transport packed to capacity, but somehow maintaining perfect safety protocols. Dr. Martinez, the council captain said carefully, your ships appear to be operating significantly over safe capacity limits. Define safe, she replied. Standard galactic protocols specify maximum occupancy based on life support capacity, emergency systems redundancy, and… Captain, Dr. Martinez interrupted gently. What's the failure rate for galactic evacuation protocols? Failure rate? How many people die during a typical emergency evacuation? The captain consulted his databases. Standard protocols maintain evacuation mortality rates below 2%. Our current mortality rate is 0, Colonel Chen reported. That's impossible, the captain said. With overcrowded ships and emergency conditions, we don't overcrowd ships, Dr. Okafor explained. We optimize them. There's a difference. Marcus Webb called up ship schematics on the main display. Look at how they've reconfigured the cargo vessels. They're not just packing people into available space, they've completely redesigned the internal systems for maximum efficiency. The display showed the interior of one of the converted human ships. What had once been a cargo hold was now a sophisticated life support environment, with modular living spaces, medical facilities, and even recreation areas. The conversion had clearly been planned and prepared well in advance. When did humanity begin preparing for large-scale evacuations? Zethka asked. About a week after first contact, Dr. Martinez replied matter-of-factly. A week after? Why? Because we realized the galaxy had problems that might require emergency solutions, she said. And because humans prepare for problems they hope they'll never face. The scope of human preparation became clear as the operation continued. Not only had they converted vessels for evacuation, they had prepared receiving facilities. As ships loaded with evacuees departed Epsilon Eridani, they were heading not to overcrowded refugee stations, but to what appeared to be completely new habitable installations. Where are you taking them? The council captain asked. Home, Dr. Martinez said simply. But your home system lacks the infrastructure to support 2 million additional people. It does now. The explanation came in fragments as the operation continued. Over the past 3 months, while engaging in diplomatic exchanges with the Galactic Council, humanity had been quietly constructing massive orbital habitats around their homeworld. Not primitive space stations, but sophisticated living environments designed to house multiple species in comfort. We studied the refugee situation at Solitude Station, Dr. Martinez explained to Zethka as they watched the evacuation proceed with impossible smoothness. We realized that the galactic community's approach to displaced populations was treating the symptoms rather than the disease. Meaning? You build camps and provide basic necessities. You maintain people rather than integrating them. We decided to do it differently. The human approach was radically different from anything in galactic precedent. Instead of temporary housing, they had constructed permanent communities, designed around the skills and cultures of the people who would live in them. Instead of charity, they offered integration and purpose. Dr. Martinez, Zethka said slowly. The construction of facilities this sophisticated would require massive resources and years of planning. How did humanity accomplish this in 3 months? We're very motivated, she replied. But Marcus Webb provided a more technical explanation. Resource optimization through distributed manufacturing. Every human facility in the system contributed production capacity. We also received unexpected help. What kind of help? Refugees from the Kythera collapse. When word spread that humans were building real homes instead of camps, about 40,000 of them volunteered to help with construction in exchange for permanent residency. The implications hit Zethka like a gravitational wave. Humanity hadn't just built evacuation infrastructure, they had solved the refugee crisis that the Galactic Council had been struggling with for years. And they had done it not through superior technology or vast resources, but through a fundamentally different approach to the problem. You're not just helping your own people, he realized. Suffering is suffering, Dr. Martinez said. It doesn't matter what species is experiencing it. The evacuation of Epsilon Eridani was completed in 36 hours, just as the colony's final life support systems collapsed. But that was only the beginning. As soon as the last transport departed, the human fleet began Phase 2 of their operation. They're not leaving, the council captain observed with growing alarm. What are they doing? The human ships had repositioned themselves around the dying colony world and were deploying massive industrial equipment. Deep space manufacturing platforms materialized from hyperspace, followed by vessels carrying what appeared to be entire industrial ecosystems. We're fixing it, Dr. Martinez said. Fixing what? The planet. What followed challenged every assumption the galactic community held about planetary rehabilitation. Standard protocols for worlds with failing ecosystem collapse involved quarantine and eventual resource extraction. The idea of actually repairing a dying world was considered economically unfeasible and technologically impossible. Humans approached it like an engineering problem. The atmospheric processors failed due to contamination in the primary filtration systems, Dr. Okafor explained, monitoring the operation from the council ship. The contamination was caused by industrial waste from the colony's manufacturing sector. The waste was generated because the colonists were using inefficient processes designed for Earth-normal conditions rather than optimized for this world's environment. So you're going to clean up the contamination? Zethka asked. We're going to redesign the entire industrial ecosystem to eliminate the contamination source, then repair the atmospheric damage using the waste products as raw materials for the new systems, Marcus Webb corrected. It's more efficient than cleanup. The scale of the human operation was staggering. They were essentially rebuilding an entire planetary infrastructure from scratch, but doing it in a way that integrated seamlessly with the local environment. Instead of imposing Earth-normal solutions, they were designing systems specifically optimized for Epsilon Eridani's unique conditions. This is impossible, the council captain insisted. Planetary rehabilitation requires decades of planning and massive resource investment. Only if you do it inefficiently, Colonel Chen replied, reviewing reports from the surface. We're not rehabilitating the planet. We're optimizing it. Dr. Martinez tried to explain the distinction. Galactic protocols assume that industrial civilization and environmental health are inherently in conflict. You build infrastructure despite environmental costs, then try to minimize the damage. We build infrastructure that improves environmental conditions. That's not possible. Why not? The question hung in the air. The council captain consulted databases, searching for technical explanations why industrial activity couldn't improve environmental conditions. He found plenty of theoretical barriers, but the human operation was demonstrating practical solutions to every single one. Your energy costs alone, he began, are negative, Dr. Okafor finished. The new atmospheric processors generate more power than they consume. The excess feeds the industrial systems, which produce more resources than they use. It's a positive feedback loop. Zethka felt a chill of recognition. This was what the predecessor warnings had been about. Not military aggression or territorial expansion, but this casual redefinition of what was possible. Dr. Martinez, he said carefully, how long have humans been planning this approach to planetary engineering? We weren't planning it, she replied. We're inventing it as we go. Inventing it? It's what humans do, Marcus Webb explained. We see problems and figure out solutions. The bigger the problem, the more interested we become. But this level of technological innovation requires years of research and development. Does it? Dr. Martinez asked. Or does it require looking at existing technology with fresh eyes and asking, what if we did this differently? The planetary rehabilitation proceeded with impossible speed. Within 72 hours of the evacuation's completion, Epsilon Eridani was not only habitable again, but its environmental systems were functioning better than they had before the crisis. It's ready for recolonization, Dr. Okafor reported. So quickly? Zethka asked. The people are already coming back, Colonel Chen said, indicating the transport patterns on the main display. Most of them never wanted to leave permanently. They just needed the planet to be safe. And they were returning. Human transports were already ferrying colonists back to their homes. But these weren't the same people who had been evacuated. Each returning resident had spent their time in the orbital habitats learning new techniques, new approaches, new ways of thinking about their relationship with their world. You didn't just save them, Zethka realized. You trained them. We prepared them, Dr. Martinez corrected, for a better future than the one they were facing. As the human fleet prepared to depart, leaving behind a transformed world and a population equipped with tools and knowledge they hadn't possessed before, Zethka finally understood what the predecessor warnings had really been about. It wasn't that humans were aggressive or dangerous in the traditional sense. It was that they were transformative. Everywhere they went, everything they touched, everyone they met, it all became more than it had been before. Dr. Martinez, he said, as the human delegation prepared to return to their own ships. The predecessor warnings about humanity. I think I'm beginning to understand them. Oh? She said with that slight smile. What do you think they were warning about? Change, Zethka replied. They were warning that once humans became involved with galactic civilization, nothing would ever stay the same. Dr. Martinez considered this for a moment. Ambassador, she said finally, was that a warning, or was it a promise? As the human ships departed, leaving behind a restored world and a transformed understanding of what was possible, Zethka realized that the galaxy was about to find out the answer to that question, whether it was ready or not. 6 months after the Epsilon Eridani incident, the galaxy was a different place. It had started small, barely noticeable shifts in how things were done. A more efficient supply route here, an improved manufacturing process there. Human consultants, appearing at disaster sites, with solutions that seemed obvious in retrospect, but revolutionary in practice. Zethka watched the reports flow across his desk with a mixture of fascination and growing unease. The Kithara refugee situation had been completely resolved. Not managed, not contained, resolved. The 47,000 displaced beings were now living in purpose-built communities that were not only self-sustaining but actually contributing to the galactic economy. The efficiency improvements at the trading stations along the outer rim had increased cargo throughput by 30%, while reducing energy consumption by half. The new atmospheric processing techniques developed during the Epsilon Eridani restoration were being implemented on dozens of worlds, turning marginal colonies into thriving settlements. And everywhere humans went, they left behind people who thought differently about problems. Ambassador, his aide Veltor announced, Dr. Martinez is here for your appointment. Zethka straightened his carapace. He had requested this meeting to discuss what the Council was beginning to call the human situation. The various species that made up galactic civilization were reporting changes that went beyond simple technological improvements. Dr. Martinez entered with her characteristic quiet confidence. But Zethka noticed she looked tired. The past 6 months had clearly been demanding for humanity's diplomatic corps. Dr. Martinez, he began. Thank you for making time to meet. I wanted to discuss some concerns that have been raised within the Council. About human activities? She asked, settling into the specially adjusted chair. About the rate of change those activities are producing. Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. Change can be frightening. We understand that. It's not fear, exactly, Zethka said, though he suspected that wasn't entirely true. It's the scope and speed of the transformations. Some council members are beginning to question whether humanity's influence on galactic civilization is entirely beneficial. What kind of concerns? Zethka activated his display, showing a galactic map marked with thousands of data points. In 6 months, human-initiated improvements have been implemented at over 4,000 separate locations across Council space. Agricultural productivity is up 17%. Manufacturing efficiency has improved by an average of 23%. Resource waste has decreased by 31%. Those sound like positive developments, Dr. Martinez observed. They are, but they represent a rate of technological and social advancement that typically takes centuries to achieve. Some species are struggling to adapt to the pace of change. Dr. Martinez studied the data for several minutes. Ambassador, may I ask you something directly? Of course. Are these concerns really about the rate of change? Or are they about humans having ideas that work better than the systems that were already in place? Rublum. The question hit closer to the truth than Zethka was comfortable admitting. Several council species had expressed frustration that human solutions often made their traditional approaches look inefficient or outdated. Perhaps both, he admitted. I see. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a moment. Ambassador, have you continued investigating those predecessor warnings? Yes. Actually, Dr. Solis has made some remarkable discoveries. May I hear them? Zethka hesitated, then decided that transparency might be the best approach. She's found more extensive references, complete text fragments that provide much more context about the predecessor's contact with early humanity. He activated another display, showing translations of ancient inscriptions. According to these records, the predecessors encountered humans approximately 50,000 years ago, when your species was still confined to Earth. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her attention focused. They made contact with Stone Age humans? Not exactly contact, more like observation and attempted guidance. Zethka highlighted specific passages. The predecessors were apparently trying to help human development, offering technological and social advancement. What happened? Humans rejected their guidance. Dr. Martinez raised an eyebrow. Rejected help from an advanced alien civilization? That seems uncharacteristic. Things are. Zethka pulled up more detailed translations. According to the records, humans didn't reject the technology itself. They rejected the dependencies it would create. The predecessors offered solutions to human problems. Disease, hunger, conflict, environmental challenges, but humans insisted on understanding and improving the solutions rather than simply implementing them. And this caused problems? For the predecessors, yes, they had helped dozens of species achieve advanced civilization through technological gifts and social guidance. With humans, every gift became a starting point for further innovation. Every solution led to new questions and better approaches. Dr. Martinez smiled slightly. That does sound like humans. The predecessors found it unsettling. One inscription reads, "We offer them fire, and they ask why it burns. We show them agriculture, and they develop new crops we never imagined. We teach them mathematics, and they find errors in our proofs. Did they continue trying to help?" Zethka highlighted another section. For several centuries. But the relationship became increasingly strained. Humans kept improving on predecessor technology, often surpassing the originals. More troubling, they kept questioning predecessor social and philosophical assumptions. Questioning how, One fragment describes a human leader asking the predecessors why their advanced civilization still had inequality and suffering. When told that such problems were inevitable in any large society, the human responded by asking if they had actually tried to solve them, or if they had simply accepted them as unsolvable. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. What did the predecessors do? They withdrew from Earth. The final records suggest they found human attitudes fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization as they understood it. Because we asked too many questions? Because you wouldn't accept that some problems couldn't be solved? Zethka said. The predecessors had built a galaxy-spanning civilization based on efficient management of limitations. Humans seemed incapable of accepting limitations as permanent. Dr. Martinez stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Ambassador, may I share something with you? Please. Humanity knew this meeting was coming. Not this specific conversation, but something like it. We've been watching the reactions to our activities across the galaxy, and we understand the discomfort. Change is hard, especially when it challenges assumptions that have guided entire civilizations. She turned back to face him. But we need you to understand something important about humans. What's that? We can't stop. The words were said quietly, without aggression or defiance. But they carried a finality that made Zethka's crystalline structure resonate with unease. Can't stop what? Specifically? Trying to make things better. Looking for solutions. Questioning why problems that could be solved are being accepted as permanent. Dr. Martinez returned to her chair. It's not something we choose to do. It's what we are. Zethka accessed more of the predecessor records, searching for relevant passages. There's another inscription here. It says, "They see suffering and move toward it. They encounter injustice and attempt to correct it. They face impossible odds and call them interesting. We fear they will remake the galaxy in their image. And you're worried about the same thing?" Some council members are, yes. Dr. Martinez considered this carefully. Ambassador, what would you like humanity to do? I'm not sure. Slow down, perhaps. Consult more extensively before implementing changes. Work within existing frameworks rather than replacing them. And if we can't do that, can't or won't. Can't, Dr. Martinez said firmly. Ambassador, let me tell you about my species' history. Humans evolved on a world that was actively hostile to our survival. We had predators faster and stronger than us, environments that changed constantly, and natural disasters that could wipe out entire populations. She paused, organizing her thoughts. We survived not by finding safe spaces and staying in them, but by never stopping our attempts to improve our situation. Every generation of humans faced challenges that seemed impossible, and every generation found ways to overcome them. But you've achieved safety now. You have technology, space travel, partnership with galactic civilization. Have we achieved safety? Dr. Martinez asked. 2 million humans nearly died at Epsilon Eridani because we accepted a planetary system that was inherently unstable. 47,000 refugees were suffering at Solitude Station because the galaxy accepted that as inevitable. How many other problems exist that we're not even aware of yet? Zethka realized he was beginning to understand the real scope of humanity's impact on the galaxy. You're not just solving individual problems. You're questioning the entire framework that allows those problems to exist. Yes, and you believe that framework needs to be changed. We believe that any framework that accepts preventable suffering as inevitable needs to be changed, yes. The implication hit Zethka with devastating clarity. Humanity wasn't just bringing new technology or more efficient processes to galactic civilization. They were bringing a fundamentally different philosophy about what civilization should be. Dr. Martinez, he said carefully, the current galactic order has maintained peace and stability for thousands of years. Yes, there are problems, but the overall system works. Does it work, or does it just persist? What's the difference? A system that works actively improves the lives of the people within it. A system that persists maintains the status quo, regardless of whether that status quo is actually beneficial. Dr. Martinez activated her portable device, displaying data that made Zethka's carapace vibrate with shock. In the 6 months since humanity began working within galactic civilization, we've identified approximately 47,000 distinct problems that are currently accepted as inevitable or unsolvable. Resource distribution inefficiencies that cause artificial scarcity, communication barriers that prevent cooperation between species, educational systems that perpetuate ignorance, political structures that consolidate power rather than serving populations. Those are complex issues. Yes, they are. But complexity doesn't mean impossibility. It means we need to work harder and think more creatively. The data continued flowing across the display. Solutions to problems Zethka hadn't even known existed. Approaches to challenges that had seemed fundamental to galactic society. Innovations that made supposedly necessary limitations look like choices. Dr. Martinez, what you're describing would require rebuilding galactic civilization from the ground up. Yes, it would. And humanity intends to do this? Dr. Martinez smiled that slight, unsettling smile. Humanity intends to help anyone who wants to participate in building something better. And those who don't want to participate will be free to maintain their current systems as long as they don't prevent others from building better ones. Zethka felt the weight of inevitability settling over him. The predecessors hadn't warned future civilizations about humanity out of malice or fear of military conquest. They had warned them because humans represented an existential challenge to any system built on accepting limitations as permanent. The warnings, he said slowly, they weren't about humans being dangerous. They were about humans being transformative. The predecessors saw what was coming, Doctor, Martinez agreed. A species that would never stop asking, why not? And what if? A species that would never accept that problems couldn't be solved, only managed. And they found that threatening. They found it incompatible with their vision of how civilization should work. And they were right, human values are incompatible with accepting preventable suffering as inevitable. Zethka accessed the final predecessor inscription, the one that had troubled him most since Dr. Salas first translated it. There's one more warning here. It says, when the children of Terra reach for the stars, the galaxy will face a choice: embrace their vision and be transformed, or oppose them and be left behind. There is no middle ground with humans. That's not a warning, Dr. Martinez said gently. That's just a description of what happens when an unstoppable force meets systems that refuse to adapt. And humanity is the unstoppable force? Humanity is what happens when a species evolves to see every problem as temporary, and every limitation as a challenge to overcome. Doctor, Martinez stood to leave. Ambassador, the galaxy can work with us to build something better than what exists now. Or it can watch us build something better despite their opposition, but we will build something better. She paused at the door. The predecessors had 50,000 years to understand humans, and chose withdrawal over cooperation. The current galactic community has had 6 months. The choice is the same, but the time frame is shorter. After Dr. Martinez left, Zethka sat alone in his office, staring at the data displays that showed a galaxy in the early stages of fundamental transformation. The changes were accelerating, spreading through galactic civilization like wildfire, as species after species discovered that human approaches to their problems worked better than what they had been using. He thought about the predecessors, pulling back from Earth 50 millennia ago, rather than adapting to human perspectives. He wondered if they had made the right choice, or if they had simply delayed an inevitable reckoning. His communicator chimed with an incoming message from the human embassy, a simple text that read, Zethka, we have some ideas about improving the Council's decision-making efficiency. Would you like to hear them? Elena. Zethka stared at the message for several minutes, then replied, yes. Outside his office window, the galaxy continued its rotation, unaware that the age of accepting limitations as permanent was coming to an end. The predecessors had warned them about humans, but no one had paid attention until Catastrophe hit. Now they were paying attention, and they were beginning to understand what the warnings had really meant. The galaxy would never be the same.